For my project, I started off strong by brainstorming ideas onto a mind map. I feel as if this helped me organise my thoughts in a clearer way and helped me communicate what exactly my creative identity is all about from the start of the year. I had plans to make over 9 different characters at the start of my project, as I thought I would be better organised and able to work much more. However, that was not the case as the project went on. I had a few personal circumstances happen outside of university, which meant that I had to unfortunately cut down on the outcome list of my project. Once I had planned what exactly I wanted to do for my project, I started my research into each character role in the real world and their assigned book counterpart, in which they would partially transform into it. I feel like this really helped me visually understand my workload and helped me pull my project together in a more visual sense, which is how I learn and how I process things. So I had something to work with and it was easier for me to understand. Um, I wish that before doing all this research, though, I had decided on cutting out some outcomes beforehand, as now looking back on it, it feels like wasted time. Looking into things that I didn't use, but in the future I would like to expand upon this project. So maybe I'll use the research then. Over the course, I neglected doing studies as part of my regular workflow until this year. Over level 6, I've done numerous studies in different areas, for example, in tone and value, shape, colour, anatomy, and environment. I feel as though these studies I did have helped my workflow incredibly, and I've also improved my skills a lot in such a short amount of time. As when you look at my work from last year in comparison to now, I feel as though I'm much more capable and able to produce work that is good. In all, I think that I will continue to study as part of my routine with painting, as it's quite obviously helped me so far, and I would like to keep on improving. Regarding my exploratory sketches, I basically just wanted to take the visuals from my research and mood boards that I made within 601 and get some ideas down and convert those visuals into something of my own. I feel as though doing this gave me a real good start to the actual designing of this project, since I could draw down whatever came to mind and I wouldn't have to stick to it too closely or to anything that I made. I did use some of these sketches in my later work, but mostly these acted as stepping stones for my project. Here we can see the developmental process for my main character, the nun. I started by expanding upon my research that I did within 602 to create some base ideas for what she could look like regarding costume, face, accessories. I wanted to explore a few different ideas with her outfit, and by doing so, I left behind the traditional Christian nun outfit for a more Middle Eastern inspired look. I feel as though this has greatly benefited my project as well, as it's gained its own creative identity by blending cultures and different accessories, as opposed to the basic nun attire that I was going to go for. I followed the same process for all of my characters when designing them, so starting with developing the sketches, then moving on to colour iteration, and then pushing the design further before I made the turnarounds. The priest was a character I really enjoyed designing. His outfit turned really beautiful in the final turnaround, and I feel as though I pushed the butterfly imagery enough to the point where you can easily read that he's inspired by a butterfly. However, I did have to change the colours later on since they reminded me too much of a koi fish. Reflecting back on my character development work for God, he didn't change much from the original, and part of me doesn't mind that so much. I mean, I was basing it upon existing imagery, so there wasn't much I could change concerning physical appearance, and the outfit, I was very set on it just acting as a modesty cloth, like how he has in artworks, or it would have been covered by clouds. I feel as though my spider printing on the cloth was a good development choice and one that helped me push my design further, as well as the spider back piece, and without these my design would have been too basic and wouldn't have enough of my ideas within it. I've already spoken lots this year about my Jesus design work, but to me it was really important to make sure that Jesus design wasn't whitewashed like how he often is portrayed in many Western art pieces, even to this day, and made sure I was referencing science and fact on what people wore in the Middle East back then. I even made it a point of referencing a documentary called Son of God, where they did a 3D reconstruction of how Jesus would have really looked. When it comes to how I feel I did on his costume work, I think I did quite well on mashing together my creative identity and the key themes throughout his traditional dress, especially being able to incorporate the mantis headpiece as part of the headdress. If I were to go back and change anything about the way that I did his design process, I would probably have tried a few more of the initial costumes in different colours to see if I wanted to use them instead. But I'm pretty happy with the choices that I made anyways. Again, I followed a similar process for all of my characters, including Michael. His process was sort of a struggle on how to balance camp, goth, and religion, as those are his core style choices I wanted to make for him. He was going to be more vibrantly coloured with his clothes, but in the end, I feel like I could make him camp in a way with over accessorizing and make him glow and be shiny. His overall end look reminds me of something you might see at the Met Gala. He's dramatic and in your face, but very well put together still. I don't really think I would change much about how he turned out in the end, other than maybe trying to put him in some more extravagant dresses rather than pants. Looking back at how my turnarounds came out, I feel pretty happy with them, even though I could have done better. As I mentioned before, I kept having some personal circumstances come up outside of uni while working on 602, so I'm honestly just proud of myself for finishing everything when I thought that I wouldn't even be able to do that. Um, I do think that I could have made these turnarounds a bit more visually interesting, but that's something I can always rework as I plan to continue with this project. For example, I think that I could have made the background a bit cooler. The grey just doesn't make my designs pop as much as I would like to, so I'll probably change that in the future. My process for planning the final paintings was a very thorough process. I like to think I thought of every possible option, or at least what I thought I could have imagined my project I made sure to explore. My story has 7 key frames or points in time that I wanted to portray with these final pieces, and I first started by doing several small thumbnails and selecting 2 from each row, as you can see with the red and blue markers, and then I made 2 more sets of thumbnails from these, selected calling them the red and the blue versions. I then, from each red and blue, selected the final ones I liked the most and took those into the development stages for each painting, trying different compositions for each one at least 4 times. By doing this, I feel as though I achieved the best possible outcomes composition-wise, as there was not much more I could have done to explore these further. Doing this also very much prepared me for my final paintings, as I had a clear idea of what I was doing, and I was able to focus a lot more on the painting side of things rather than trying to figure out composition or reworking things during the painting process. With my final paintings, even though I was well prepared with them with my thumbnails, what I did not consider was colour thumbnailing during the first few of these paintings. I'm happy with how they turned out, I just wish I allowed myself more time to finish these, as I feel as though I spent too long on character designing and not enough on these paintings. Though, as I keep mentioning, I do plan to rework and expand upon this project, so this will allow me in the future to use these as reference for bigger and greater pieces that I find myself more proud of. I also plan to put my final pieces into an art book to sell at the end of the show, but looking over the work I have produced, I don't think I'm ready to sell this, so I won't be doing that. The second half of my final pieces are much more visually impactful than the first, in my opinion. I feel it's because I felt more inspired by these concepts, but also I was finally getting into the groove of painting them. Like I said before, I didn't give myself much time to paint these. My schedule I put together in 601 for 602 was basically thrown out of the window. However, I managed to pull it all together in the end. Regarding techniques within these final paintings, I feel as though my studies really helped me, as I became much more familiar with Procreate and the brushes on there when you look in comparison to my older work. In there, these are much more textured and how I would like my work to appear. I also feel as though the piece I worked on in black and white and then used overlays turned out much better than when I picked by eye and then used overlays to blend the colours together. However, that's not to say I can't do this anymore. The bottom painting I picked by eye, and I feel like that's the most visually beautiful out of all the paintings that I did. So maybe this means I should just mix up my workflow a little bit more with pieces where I'm struggling with value and work in black and white first. When it comes to how my external engagement went, I think it went quite well. The group I was working with for the scene we created was really lovely, and I enjoyed contributing to something that I can look back on with fondness. Plus, I wanted to do a group project for a while, like this with friends. I wasn't too well educated on magical girls, other than Sailor Moon and Tokyo Mew Mew, so my concept kind of strays away from traditional magical girls, and I went for a more high fashion Met Gala approach to her design and vibe. Our group decided we should base our girls on candy, so my girl is based on After Eights. It's all the green. Plus, I feel like After Eights are a sort of fancy chocolate. So it goes well with the high fashion aspect of my design work. The painting for the zine and the process of her designing went well. There isn't much I would change, really, other than the pose, as I had some trouble making that one work out well for me. Moving on to the reflection part of the presentation, where I'll be talking about university and my experience as a whole. Over the course of my time at Leeds Art Uni, I've mainly found myself the most interested in character design. In the first year, I was still struggling with anatomy, and I was lacking in ideas for my characters, so they ended up visually weak. It's only in the second year where I felt I started to find my creative identity within a dark gothic genre of design, so I definitely have found myself through designing characters. I knew who I was for a while, and what I liked, but part of me felt like my work had to be more diverse and open to different aesthetics, which, yes, it's also important, but specializing in a certain area is beneficial, and it helps me have a more concentrated and cohesive portfolio for employment. This year, I feel I'm able to connect more with my creative identity whilst also exploring different underlying themes within my work. Like, I finally feel like I have a good blend between who I am being represented in my work whilst not excluding different aesthetics completely. Looking into my technical skills over the past 3 years when it comes to character design, I have quite obviously improved. I feel like my jump in skill from year one to year two was quite a big leap, and you can clearly see I was getting more used to using digital software like Photoshop and trying more brushes for texture. Moving on to this year, I do think my work has come together more when you consider anatomy and colour and design work, as I'm able to add into existing clothing and make it more unique. Since I switched to Procreate in the last part of level 5, I'm still coming around to Procreate, so maybe if I continued on with Photoshop, my work would look even better than it does now. But I feel it's just like on level with the second year at the moment. My final paintings have come on a long way since the start of the course, I think. When I started the course, the idea of painting more than one person in a scene and having them interacting was such a daunting task to me, because whenever I tried this in my personal art, it just didn't look right to me. However, as time went on over the course, I felt more confident in my skills and more able to try new things and to keep pushing at an idea to make it work out for me. So in the final works this year, I made it a point to try capture characters interacting within a space together. I also tried this in level 5, and I feel as though it was good practice, but it didn't. I wasn't completely happy with it. Pictured are the best, in my opinion, pieces I've made for each project in uni. You can clearly see they've come a really long way in terms of technical skills from level 4 to level 5, and then colouring levels and brushwork from level 5 to level 6. I also feel like my work has taken a better turn in terms of atmosphere. I feel as if I'm more able to accurately portray a tone and setting with colour and composition now. My environment work is something I've always been very self-conscious about and wanting to improve on, but I just didn't know how to. In the first year, I was really struggling with how to make my work look good and actually readable as an environment, since I prefer to work with a more interpretive style. I really just want the brush to be able to speak for itself and to fill in the blanks. In year 2, I tried 3D modelling, which was hell and definitely not for me. Even though it wasn't enjoyable, it helped me be able to produce work that had buildings in without them looking too skewed, since perspective grids always felt really unnatural to me. However, going into this year, I tried environments with the Sims. I built an entire model for the church in my project, but in the end, I decided to work without the model. Uh, and I can just use plants or mist or other like environmental things to blend my buildings into the environment and make them more realistic that way. Once I decided that, my work started looking a lot better, so that's probably how I will continue to work with environments in the future. My prop work in the first year is kind of good to say. I never really explored props before. Plus the traditional, and my work is more suited to digital work, so the fact that they came out looking good uh, is is quite cool. Uh, they look really good, like I said. The way that I used the marker and watercolor on them for coloring was really good for my standards at the time with traditional work. In year two, I went wild with prop design. I was really enjoying the process of looking at all the furnishings and reworking them and making them my own. Plus, the rendering that I did, especially on the chandelier, is some of my best work. I really am super proud of the prop work that I did in level 5, and it makes me sad that this year in level 6 I was unable to do much of it at all. I had so much planned, like spider bottles and a moth-inspired dagger, and other smaller things, but unfortunately I had to drop those and only have a practice dagger study I did in preparation for the props that I planned. The dagger is also some of my best work. At the time, I didn't really like it, but now I'm having the chance to reflect back on it and to get another look at it. And the texturing and tonal values are really good. To say again that I came into the course with little to no experience with designing props and looking at how textures work, so I'm happy with that. Creature work isn't something I paid much attention to through the course as I wasn't overly interested in it at first. I went into my creature work of level 4 feeling like I had to do something in order to try it and see if I enjoyed it, which wasn't too bad. And I like what I made, but I just wasn't enjoying it as much as I wanted to, and it wasn't hitting the same way as character design did for me. And then fast forward to level 5 to the brief set by teachers, and I did the Magic the Gathering card brief, in which I had to create a creature. I enjoyed this process a lot more, but some things still didn't feel as fulfilling to me. Uh, when I look at like other things that I was doing, it just didn't feel right. It wasn't until this year where I discovered I really love drawing bugs and painting them. My project fully opened my eyes to the horror aspect of designing creatures too. They don't have to just be animals, no, they have to look similar to existing animals. I feel now that I found an area that I really enjoy in creature design. I want to explore it a little bit more in the future and see where that might take me. But for now, I feel like I'm mostly still focused on character design. One thing that's majorly changed about my work through the course is that now I actually do studies. It's one of those things that I should have been doing from the start, but I always drew or painted from reference, and that's how I learned things. But in the second year, I started doing practice sketches and studies from photos in preparation for final pieces I'd be making, and even though I didn't do many of them, they did help. This year, I made sure I was doing plenty of studies. Uh, I knew that if I wanted to improve my work more, that I would have to keep trying new methods and pushing myself to relearn and observe how other people achieve the same results that I'm looking for. Uh, if I hadn't have done the studies this year, my final pieces would have come out in the same way my level 5 pieces did, and even though that wasn't necessarily bad, you always want to be changing and improving, so this year's studying has really helped me. Um, My workflow and progress hasn't changed much since before I started uni. I always did the sketch, lay color underneath, paint over the top, and then experiment with overlays to get the colors to become more visually interesting. However, I have, because of uni, introduced thumbnailing, color testing, and the use of a more controlled color palette into my work. Before uni, my work was super saturated, and not that that's a bad thing, but I've always wanted a more moody and atmospheric aura to my work that resembles oil paintings. And by pushing myself and studying hard over the past 3 years, I feel like I've finally gotten there. Obviously, there's a lot more to change and improve and learn, but I feel like I'm finally at a point with my process and workflow where instead of just pure chaos and spontaneous choices, it's a more controlled and smart way of working without restricting myself so much that I'm unhappy and feel trapped within my own work system. Over the course of uni, I've always thought that I would be able to go straight into trying to find a job within the art industry, but then I wanted to just study the master's degree. I still want to do both of these things, but before I leap back into education, I want to, one, give myself a rest from education since all I've ever been doing with my life, and two, I want to set up my life and have a job. As I mentioned through the presentation, that I've had to cut back on work. Um, I wanted to make this year because of personal circumstances outside of uni. And before I decide to rely on art for an income or throw myself into more student debt, I just want to be able to set up my own home life away from parents and to actually have my own space since I had to move back with my family halfway through the year. Once I'm able to set up my life and have a bit more stability, I think that I'll be ready to try and apply for the masters. And then I'll most likely study part time for 2 years so I'm able to have a job and not feel weighed down by deadlines and life responsibilities. After this, my art career is pretty much still open to what I would like to do. I know that it's based within concept and character design. I would like to work on freelancing websites, creating commission work for people and companies by being my own boss as well that way, and possibly being able to sell and display my prints at local art events.